Welcome back. Going to do some more chess puzzles. I made some progress last time, 2 points, and let's see if we can do better this time. It looks like this knight has just taken my rook. I can capture it back. However, it can't really get out right now. Both of those squares are covered, so I don't have to worry about that. I do notice that I have a check that's protected by this bishop this way on g2. The only legal move at that point would be for the king to move over, at which point I would withdraw my rook. I think. This doesn't make as much sense because it's not check. Like, it would be check then after I pulled it back, like say to capture the knight, and that would be mate as well. Wouldn't it? Let's see. This isn't check. So at that point, white would want to, I don't know, move their rook or something because they're not in check. And then when I brought the bishop back to hit the knight, the king could move this way and it would not be mate. But if I went with the rook first, the only legal move, there's no, because it is check, the king would have to move. And then, as long as I stayed on this file somewhere, it would be checkmate. So let me try that. Okay. And now, since that's not the last move of the puzzle, I know there's only ever one move. So, for example, this would be mate, right? I think. But that might not be what the puzzle wants. This would be checkmate. This would be checkmate. I think all of those will be checkmate. So where does it want me to place the rook? If I move it to the wrong square, is it going to count it against me? Because, for example, if I go here, that's not checkmate. The king can come back. But then I can go back. And if I go here, obviously, it would capture me. But any move down this file is checkmate. So does it matter which one? I don't think they can block any of them because it has to block the bishop, right? They can block the bishop, but then I would retake it. So does it matter? I don't think it matters where I place the rook, because wherever I place the rook, they're going to block here and I'm going to take it. So should I just put the rook back where it was? That better be it. It was the windmill, wasn't it? That's what it wanted. What? Sorry, I'm going to go to the Analyze page. And, okay. Yeah, the first move was taking my rook, which the computer did. And then my only good move is this, and it says mate in 6. But I have a question about that. Like, what was the problem with this move here? Oh, sorry, the king has to move first. Okay, it says it's only mate in 5 if I do that. This isn't mate? What? Why? Sorry. I'm confused. Why isn't this mate? Oh, because the pawn can move forward. Golly, I'm so blind. The pawn can block the bishop. Okay, that's why I had to do this, which is check again. And the king can either move back or the bishop can block. It chose to block with the bishop. I took. Now the king has to move here. I come back. Now the king has to go there. Now there's no pawn. So anywhere I come back, the rook has to temporarily block, and that's mate. Okay. So it did matter. That's what we learned from that one. All right. Well, I lost 9 points on that because I got the first move right. And I've noticed if you get the first or more moves correct at the beginning but then miss one, it doesn't take off as many points. Well, that's disappointing. Okay. And it took 6 minutes. All right. I do have a check, but I think the knight would just capture. The knight from c3 would just capture on a2 if I checked with that bishop. And then the fact that I have a queen behind it doesn't make any difference because the king is also guarding that square. So I don't think that's it. And that is my only check. Also, there's a very strong battery lined up here. I don't know where it's going, though, because they're not going to blunt this battery by giving away the queen for a bishop. That doesn't make sense. And even if that knight wasn't there, and I did this, I checked on a2, the king could just move out of check. It would be nice to get rid of that pawn, but again, the king could just move out of check. So the reason I say that is because I was about to consider some way of getting rid of this knight, perhaps with this, or something, but I don't think that's it, because this isn't a mate threat even if the knight is gone. So my second consideration is there a way to threaten a piece or a queen? I can't even threaten mate right now, I don't think. But I can threaten the queen, for example, with a pawn move. Where was the queen going to go if I threaten the queen? It's not going to go here because of my pawn and bishop. It's not going to go here because of my bishop and knight. I don't think it would take the pawn because of the bishop. My bishop covers this square. The pawn sitting here would cover this square. So the queen would have to go all the way over there. Maybe that's it, because the queen is fairly trapped by its own pieces, and because it's sitting on d5 or d4 instead of d3, if it were on d3 it could escape. But it's on d4, so it doesn't have the backward moving diagonals. So if I threatened it with c5, it could go backward one, I suppose. I don't know what I would do then. Or it could go here. If it went to a4, I could further threaten it with b5. And then it would start getting pretty stuck. But what if it just went backwards? If I play c5 and the queen just goes back one to d3, not only is it out of danger from that pawn, it also now has a new escape square. I could push the pawn one more, but then couldn't it just come back or go that way? I mean, that would take it out of the action, but it probably doesn't want to be at the front of this battery anyway. I mean, if I were that queen, I'm just thinking if I were white, I actually can flip the board, but I'm not going to. I would just step back one. And if they came at me again, I would go to e2, I think, and prepare to put the rook in front of it. That way, this bishop then starts to be in trouble. But I don't see much else. If I go there and they step back, what else can I threaten? This knight can't... Well, okay. The knight would be able to move after that pawn moves. But right now, the knight really doesn't have a lot of places to go. But I don't know that just pushing the queen back, or even over here, where I could threaten it again. But then again, I think it still gets out, doesn't it? Here, here, here. It can step forward. Now, then it's, well, it's not really threatening anything at that point, but it's safe for the time being, and it's protecting a2 from there. I guess at that point I could go ahead and threaten the knight, but then it would just go here. And block, I don't know. That gets pretty complicated. I'm still saying it would just go back one. And then what do I have? A place to put my knight? I have a place to put my knight that can get here, which attacks a2. But I've spent several minutes on this one. I'm just going to do it. Because there's nothing else, right? That was it. That's a big relief. Because I thought I was going to get it wrong again. Okay. And I had said if it moved over here, I could threaten it again with this pawn, b5. Pardon me. But then it could move here. It could move to a5. For that matter, the bishop's not pointing at a3 anymore, so it could go back to a3. And yes, I could hit it again by doing this, but then this bishop's not hitting b3 anymore. Oh, but the pawn would be. So if I did this and it went back, I could go forward again, but then it just comes back again. I really don't think that's it. Is there something else? And putting my knight here, yes, it's safe. And it heads that direction. And from there, not only hits a2, but protects a6. So is it the knight move or is it the pawn move? But you know that white has just added a defender to a2, which is where I'm kind of aiming at, right? Because that's where the king is kind of entombed. But they have defenders for this now. Not to mention the possibility of whatever that is, b3. I have a really hard time with when the board's flipped. For some reason, I'm much better at naming the squares when I'm white. But it seems like 70-80% of these puzzles, I have the black pieces. There's still a weaker battery pointing here. But there's another move. I don't think it's this to threaten the knight, because there's a knight over here that just hits that. The knight on f3 is guarding that square. My knight still can't go here or here. It can go there, but that's a long road. And it's not really threatening anything right just yet. So I think this must be a queen trapping thing. Wait. Okay, b5. The queen's I think the only smart move is a5, because going back and then I fork these two pieces, the knight and the queen. So I think if I play b5, I think this queen has to come forward, where it's kind of out of the action at that point. on a5. And then do I just go forward again to threaten the knight? Where does it go? It can go back. It can go here even, because the queen just vacated that square. And I don't have another pawn to point at it. That's not it, because nothing is guarding that square. I don't have anything guarding that square, so I'm not chasing the queen with my bishop. I'm going to do the pawn move. Okay, why didn't it go here? Because now I'm going to fork the two pieces. This one's obvious. All the other moves in this puzzle were not obvious to me. But this one's obvious, which raises the question of why didn't the queen move forward on that one? Unless there's some sort of trick. Yeah. Okay. I got 5 points for that, but I'm going to click the analysis button. And see, it's not cropped correctly. The analysis board is slightly different than the other thing. Okay. Well, the first move of the puzzle was the king moving over, and apparently that was a blunder. So I brought forward the c pawn to threaten the queen. And it says it has multiple oh, look, the top engine move is back where I said I would go. Oh, now now it's changed its mind. Now it says just to take that pawn. Nope. Now it says go back. Or here. None of them said to go over there. I don't get that one at all. But I do get this, which is what I said I would do. Okay, but it went over here to a4. And then b5 is the only good move for black, which is what I did. And then it says this. Rook captures this bishop. Or queen to a5, which is what I said. Why didn't it go here? Because then my entire thing changes. It's to threaten the queen with this knight. Oh, because when I threatened the queen with the knight, it would have to go back there anyway. Okay, that makes sense to me. That's why it went back here now. Okay, I got that. And then the only good move for black is this. And then the queen would go here. And then I trap it? No, because now it goes here. But now I take the knight. Okay, I understand. I like the ones where I understand and got it right, like this one. I didn't understand at the beginning, but I think I understand it now. And we're going to move on. Oh, an endgame puzzle. Bishop and rook endgame. And I have the white pieces this time. And I'm still 4 points below where I started this video. Okay. The black bishop has just moved here, perhaps trying to prevent my passed. No, that's not a passed pawn. I'm going that way. Okay. I'm going up because I have the white pieces. So why did the bishop go here? Oh, targeting that pawn, perhaps? Possibly. That's my most advanced pawn, is my g5 pawn. So it makes sense that this bishop would target it. This pawn is already under threat. I'm not sure why the opponent didn't just take it. I have 2 checks. Yes, I have 2 checks. I have rook to h8 check, which leaves only one legal move. Because my king guards these squares, my bishop guards these squares. So with my rook on h8, the king would have to come to g7. And then once it did, I think I would just go to g8, because the bishop, again, would be guarding these squares. The pawn is guarding these squares. And then the king would then have to go here. Wait, that's getting pretty complicated. Okay, well that's one scenario. h8 check. The king has to go here. And then I would go behind it, and we would be making a little kind of a whirlpool around each other there. Another check, the only other check that I see, is rook to f7. And again, my king cuts off these two squares. And the rook obviously would cut off this, and the bishop would cut off that, and the bishop would not cut off that, so it would have to go to g7. The king would have to go to g7. That's 8. g8, the 8th rank. And then anywhere I moved my rook would be check from the bishop. So let's say check, king has to go here. Rook back to f3. Then the king has to choose, with my rook back here and the bishop coming down this way, the king would have to choose one of these squares to go to, and I would win the bishop. And protect this pawn. That seems better than the other way, because this one I don't think leads to mate. As we've said, the king would come up. My only good follow-up check would be to go behind it on g8. Then the king could come over to h7, and I couldn't check again at that point. So I'd just be kind of stuck there. And the bishop would be winning this pawn soon, and the rook would be winning this pawn soon. So this check is better for those reasons. Okay, now I don't see anything better than that. Because again, anywhere I move my rook is check from the bishop. But if I move my rook sillily, in a silly way to here, the king just captures it. Same thing with here. I think it has to be that. Okay, because not only do I get rid of the bishop, but I save both of those pawns. Okay, well, I've made 1 point of progress in this video. Does that mean I shouldn't click next? Oh, I'm such a glutton for punishment. I clicked next. My hand did that before I had decided in my brain. Okay. We both have a rook. No. They have an extra rook. We both have a queen. We both have rooks and bishops, but my opponent has an extra rook. An entirely extra rook. For no reason. I do have 2 checks. There's this check and this check. Those are my only checks. If the rook and the bishop were not in the way, I would have another check down there. I'm only mentioning that because I'm trying to train myself to see those diagonals. That's one of my weak points, is seeing alternate diagonals, especially diagonals away from the action. And that's really important for the queen, I have learned. Several times recently, my blunders have been not seeing something like this and only seeing these others, because I'm seeing the horizontal and vertical movements and the diagonals toward the action, but I'm not seeing the diagonals away from the action, the geometry, like this. But anyway, 2 checks. One is better than the other, because otherwise it wouldn't be a puzzle. I'm going to guess that it's the queen that's better, but first I'm going to look and see if there's anything else. For example, I could just take this rook. I could. I could also take this passed pawn, which is looking pretty dangerous here on the 6th rank, coming down. But I mean, I kind of protecting that. If I check here, the king just moves out of the way to h1. But then is that mate? No, it's not mate, because their bishop would block. But then I would win the rook. But if the puzzle was about winning the rook, wouldn't I just take it now? Or is this better because I win a rook? I mean, win a pawn, and then win a rook? Is that what it is? Or if I take with the bishop, I could take the rook with the bishop as well. But then that guards this passed pawn via the queen. So maybe I want this bishop here to keep the queen from guarding that passed pawn. Maybe. Again, which I could just capture right now. But if I just did that, then guess what? We have connected rooks on the 7th rank, which I do not want. Because boom, 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 and I can't stop that. That's what would happen if, I think, if I took this pawn. This rook would just go right here. If I took the rook now, that just advances because the queen's right behind it. I am guarding the promotion square twice, but if the queen's not protecting it at all, because my bishop's in the way, and I check, the king goes there. Oh, no, that would be mate. Oh, my goodness. Wow. Why was I thinking of that? Holy. Whatever you think is holy. Or not holy. So, I'm not making fun of it. I promise. Yeah, I went through way too much on that for a mate in 2. And the theme isn't even mate in 2. Let me correct that really quick. All right. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching.